number 4 focused on the scheme to pressure swing state electors to switch their votes to Trump. When that failed, their plan was to create a false slate of electors to submit to Congress and to the National Archives to set up the argument that there was confusion about who had won the election. That's the excuse that, according to Trump's people, Vice President Mike Pence needed to refuse to count Biden's votes, saying one of two things. Number 1, either that there was a confusion about which ones were the legitimate slates of electors, something completely made up because there was no confusion. Biden's electoral votes were certified and Trump's weren't. Those Trump electoral votes that some states tried to submit were absolutely fake. Or number 2, to send the certified votes back to the state legislatures, and in that case, state legislatures with Republican majorities would recertify their votes for Trump. This scheme was illegal. So today I'm going to give you a summary of the most important moments from the January 6th committee's 4th hearing. If you want to catch up on my summaries for the other hearings, check out this playlist right here. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel below and click on the bell so you get notified every time I upload one of these videos summarizing the January 6th committees or anything else breaking down what goes on with US politics. Now let's go back to the illegal scheme that Trump and his supporters wanted to use so he could stay in the White House for a second term, keeping in mind that Trump continues to this day to attack our election systems to threaten our democracy. Trump and his team pressured state legislators to throw out the votes for Biden and instead certify votes for Trump. They called these people, they invited them to the White House, and also threatened them on social media, sending protesters to these people's homes. And since that didn't work, it was time for a different tactic. They asked state politicians to make up alternative and false slates of electors. They promised them that those slates of electors would only be used if the courts decided that the certified votes were illegitimate. That was an absolute lie. Their plan was to use the fact that there were 2 sets of electoral votes for some states to justify throwing out both, and that would get rid of the legitimate Biden electors and give the election to Trump. This hearing was split into 2. During the first half, we heard from state officials pressured by Trump and his people. Russell Rusty Bowers, the Speaker of the Arizona House of Representatives, Brad Raffensperger, the Georgia Secretary of State, and Gabriel Sterling, the Chief Operating Officer in the Office of the Georgia Secretary of State, responsible for overseeing elections. All 3 of these men are Republicans. Now let me start with Arizona House Speaker Rusty Bowers. He talked about how Trump and his allies pressured him for weeks to produce a second state of electors or to decertify the existing ones. Rudy Giuliani and another lawyer by the name of Jenna Ellis, that's the woman that says that Simone Biles and Megan Rapinoe are losers, they promised to produce evidence that undocumented immigrants and dead people had voted in Arizona, but they never presented any proof. Giuliani even pressured Rusty Bowers, saying that as Republicans, they had to stick together to put their man back in the White House. Now I have to pause here for a second and emphasize how this man, Rusty Bowers, is a Republican. During the hearing, he talked about his admiration for President Ronald Reagan, and you could see how difficult this whole situation was for him. He shared some excerpts from his diary where he wrote, "It is painful to have friends turn on me with such rancor. But I do not want to be a winner by cheating. I will not play with laws I swore allegiance to." Let me show you some clips from his testimony to the January 6th committee.
During that conversation, did you ask Mr. Giuliani for proof of these allegations of fraud that he was making?
On multiple occasions, yes.
And when you asked him for evidence of this fraud, what did he say?
He said that they did have proof, and I asked him, do you have names? For example, we have 200,000 illegal immigrants, some large number, 5,000 or 6,000 dead people, etc. And I said, do you have their names? Yes. Will you give them to me? Yes. The president interrupted and said, "Give the man what he needs, Rudy." He said, I will. And that happened on at least 2 occasions, that interchange in the conversation.
So Mr. Giuliani was claiming in the call that there were hundreds of thousands of undocumented people and thousands of dead people who had purportedly voted in the election?
Yes,
And you asked him for evidence of that?
I did.
And did you ever receive from him that evidence either during the call, after the call, or to this day?
Never.
It was disturbing.
And John King, we heard allegations from Rusty Bowers and the committee that there were 2 other members of Congress who apparently played a role in the scheme. Speaker of the House Bowers, Speaker of the Arizona House Bowers, said that Congressman Andy Biggs specifically reached out to him and asked him if he would decertify the electors. And then we also heard testimony from an investigator on the committee that a staffer for Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson reached out to the office of Vice President Pence and wanted to present these fake electors from Wisconsin and Michigan.
And I think that is part of the committee is presenting this conspiracy. This is not just one man, not just Donald Trump venting. Donald Trump had a lot of help after it was long over. It was over. The whistle had blown. The court challenges had failed. The recounts and the audits had confirmed Joe Biden won. And yet you have members of Congress, members of the House, members of the Senate, the White House Chief of Staff, enabling the President of the United States.
Trump tried to pressure state officials by pushing his supporters to harass them at home. Rusty Bowers shared that people still harass him every week. They come to his house and call him a pedophile and a pervert. It was heartbreaking to hear him share this part of his testimony because back in December 2020 and January 2021, his daughter was very sick, she was dying, and Bowers' wife was taking care of her at their home while these protesters were outside their house. The other 2 witnesses during the first half were Georgia officials. Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger talked about how Trump's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, reached out to him 18 times to set up a call with Trump. This is a call you might have heard about. It lasted 67 minutes, and this is the call where Trump pressured Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger to find 11,780 votes, one more than Biden got in the state of Georgia.
So, look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state.
President Trump didn't win by hundreds of thousands of votes in Georgia, did he?
No, he did not. I've been traveling through the state of Georgia for a year now, and simply put, in a nutshell, what happened in fall of 2020 is that 28,000 Georgians skipped the presidential race, and yet they voted down ballot in other races. And the Republican congressman ended up getting 33,000 more votes than President Trump. And that's why President Trump came up short.
Brad Raffensperger also described how he and his family had been harassed.
After the election, my email, my cell phone was doxxed, and so I was getting texts all over the country, and then eventually my wife started getting the text, and hers typically came in as sexualized texts, which were disgusting. You have to understand that Trish and I, we met in high school, and we've been married over 40 years now, and so they started going after her, I think, just to probably put pressure on me. Why don't you just quit, walk away? And so that happened, and then some people broke into my daughter-in-law's home, and my son has passed, and she's a widow, and has 2 kids, and so we're very concerned about her safety also.
And Mr. Secretary, why didn't you just quit and walk away?
Because I knew that we had followed the law and we had followed the Constitution. And I think sometimes moments require you to stand up and just take the shots when you're doing your job. And that's all we did. You know, we just followed the law and we followed the Constitution. And at the end of the day, President Trump came up short. But I had to be faithful to the Constitution. And that's what I swore an oath to do.
Sadly, these examples of harassment also went beyond state officials. In the second part of the hearing, we heard testimony from another witness, Ms. Shaye Moss, an election worker from the state of Georgia who recruited her mother to work with her during the 2020 election. Both Ms. Moss and her mother, Ruby Freeman, were targeted by Trump and Rudy Giuliani.
Your proud service as an election worker took a dramatic turn on the day that Rudy Giuliani publicized a video of you and your mother counting ballots on election night. President Trump, Rudy Giuliani, and others claimed on the basis of this video that you and your mother were somehow involved in a plot to kick out observers, bring suitcases of false ballots for Biden into the arena, and then run them through the machines multiple times. None of that was true, was it?
None of it.
I'd like to show you some of the statements that Rudy Giuliani made in a second hearing before the Georgia state legislators, a week after that video clip from State Farm Arena was first circulated by Mr. Giuliani and President Trump. I want to advise viewers that these statements are completely false and also deeply disturbing.
Tape earlier in the day of Ruby Freeman and Shaye Moss and one other gentleman quite obviously surreptitiously passing around USB ports as if they're vials of heroin or cocaine. I mean, it's obvious to anyone who's a criminal investigator or prosecutor, they are engaged in surreptitious illegal activity again that day. And that's a week ago, and they're still walking around Georgia lying. They should have been questioned already. Their places of work, their homes should have been searched for evidence of ballots, for evidence of USB ports, for evidence of voter fraud.
These two women and also Moss's grandmother were doxxed, meaning that their personal information was shared openly online and people harassed them until they had to leave their homes. The FBI warned Ms. Freeman to leave her home for 2 months around the time of the January 6th because agents worried for her safety. Some of the statements by Ruby Freeman make you honestly want to cry. Listen to this.
For my entire professional life, I was Lady Ruby. My community in Georgia, where I was born and lived my whole life, knew me as Lady Ruby. I built my own business around that name, La Ruby's Unique Treasures, a pop-up shop catering to ladies with unique fashions. I wore a shirt that proudly proclaimed that I was, and I am, Lady Ruby. Actually, I had that shirt on. I had that shirt in every color. I wore that shirt on Election Day 2020. I haven't worn it since, and I'll never wear it again. Now I won't even introduce myself by my name anymore. I get nervous when I bump into someone I know in the grocery store who says my name. I'm worried about who's listening. I get nervous when I have to give my name for food orders. I'm always concerned of who's around me. I've lost my name and I've lost my reputation. I've lost my sense of security. All because a group of people starting with number 45 and his ally, Rudy Giuliani, decided to scapegoat me and my daughter, Shaye, to push their own lies about how the presidential election was stolen.
Towards the end of the hearing, the committee shared that 2 lawmakers appeared to participate in the attempt to overthrow the election. Representative Andy Biggs from Arizona apparently called Rusty Bowers to pressure him, and Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson wanted to hand the fake slates of electors from Michigan and Wisconsin to Mike Pence on January 6th. Wow. My next summary will focus on the committee's 5th hearing, which took place on Thursday, June 23rd. This hearing explored Trump's effort to use the Justice Department to throw out the 2020 election results and keep him in the White House for a second term. Now, if you want to catch up on my other January 6th hearing summaries, check out this playlist that I've made for you. And also, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and turn on the bell so you get notified every time I upload one of these January 6th hearing summaries or any other video about important issues breaking down what's going on in US politics. Nos vemos pronto. Ciao!